Good afternoon and welcome to Autism Journeys, and we're delighted to have Dr. John Sharry with us, who is a social worker, child and family psychotherapist and a leading innovator in solution-focused practice. Welcome, John.
Great to be talking to you today.
And thank you very much. And we're absolutely over the moon because we know you're coming down to Cork to the Rochestown Hotel to hold a conference, and you've actually added an extra date due to a sellout course in helping children overcome anxiety.
That's right, yeah. No, we've added 2 extra dates, in fact, so there's another one now in January. So there's lots of interest in it, so the first ones have been sold out.
Fantastic. And the extra date is Saturday the 13th of January 2018.
That's right, yes.
Brilliant. Now, we actually follow a blog here from a lady, Nicole Duggan, My Little Boy Blue, and she's got a 3-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. He's nonverbal and has autism, and she's actually dismayed that he's only 3 years of age and he's been diagnosed with anxiety. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And would that be the youngest age that you'd heard of?
Well, lots of children suffer from anxiety. It's a very, very common and prevalent problem, and that's often related to autism is a particular factor in that. Lots of children who have autism are also anxious, and sometimes children who have milder forms of autism, a lot of their autism overlaps very much with social anxiety, so they get very anxious in certain situations. So there's quite a lot of overlap between them. Like whether you get a diagnosis or not is in a way is a moot point, but lots of children do experience anxiety from very young ages.
John, can I ask you, with regards just to anxiety, what exactly is anxiety? Because I've no doubt lots of our listeners won't have an understanding of what it is.
Well, everybody, anxiety is a very normal, the first thing is to say anxiety is a very normal feeling, and it's a very important feeling to feel lots of the time. You should feel anxious in new situations. That helps you prepare. You should feel anxious when you're taking on new tasks or when you're meeting new people. It's very normal to feel a degree of anxiety because that helps you perform. Anxiety becomes a problem when it's you feel over anxiety, and it begins it tips into a sort of feeling that then stops you from doing things as opposed to motivating you to do things. Like you can be the classic thing is with a small child, they might have a 3-year-old, they might have separation anxiety. They're very fearful of their not being there with their parent, and as a result they don't go anywhere, or they avoid going to situations, or they throw a massive hysterical tantrum with the prospect of their parent leaving them, and then their anxiety is actually causing them lots of problems. Okay.
And with regards to, we'd say, anxiety's individual effect, John, do you find that people with autism are affected perhaps a little bit differently to those people that don't have a diagnosis of autism, or is it just an overarching effect for everyone?
Well, I think everyone has experiences degrees of anxiety and different severities of it. And if people have severe anxiety, then they may get a diagnosis from a mental health professional. That means it's a bigger problem. But certainly in my experience of working with young people with autism and with children with autism, anxiety is often very much a feature of the condition, particularly for children on the milder end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Can I ask you, John, with regards to treating a person then, we'd say specifically with autism, is there a different method, or is there a specific method that needs to be followed in order to, I suppose, help the child overcome or to live with their anxieties?
Generally, there's lots of different things that help, so there's not one method or such. It's about trying to build a toolkit of things that helps the child manage their anxiety, so that it doesn't become dysfunctional, that it actually can be a function. Like I always start with families that we first trying to understand the positives of their anxiety and understand what it means, because there is always a positive behind it. Like if it's a social anxiety, it's an anxiety that's calling them to prepare and understand that there's a difficult social situation coming up. So to try to start with that it's a preparing thing, and then try to use that then to learn ways to use the anxiety more positively. So I try to work with young people that try to get them to problem solve as to what is causing them their anxiety or what are the problems, and then to take action that would help them feel less anxious. So if they're particularly anxious about a social situation, as often they're not sure what they're going to say, they're worried they might be excluded, then we look at coaching them in strategies as to what they could say in a social situation so that they feel less anxious going to that, and also what they could do to help themselves be less excluded, or what their parents could do to help them feel more included. So problem solving is and taking action is very much the opposite of anxiety, is actually where you commit to doing something. And then the other key feature of helping somebody with anxiety is helping them learn to manage the feeling of anxiety and reduce their feeling of anxiety in their body. So it really centres on sort of relaxation of some sort, or distracting themselves, and that's very particular to each child, what they can do and what skills you can teach them. And so that's another focus. It could be sort of breathing or relaxation for one children. It could be learning some way of distracting themselves and so forth.
So, John, realistically, what you're saying is that obviously it's very individual, so to the child and their specific needs. But I suppose you're saying as well that anxiety management, like relaxation, deep breathing, whatever relaxation method works for the child, is something that all parents should really be looking at as a way in which to manage anxiety. Would I be right?
Yes, and as I say, it is very particular to what works for one individual doesn't work for another. So when I always, when talking to parents, I say, how does their child relax themselves when he's very upset? And some might say he goes off and bounces on the trampoline, so he needs a physical distraction.
Yeah.
Some withdraw for a little bit, cut off for a little bit, and that's how they help relax. Some talk it out, or verbal. Children may do that. That would be a harder tactic for children who've got autistic type difficulties to verbalise and discuss their feelings of anxiety. But that's another tactic that's possible to try to teach and coach them in. So you try to look at what they can do and then help them manage. But ultimately, you want to not let the anxiety
debilitate them, I suppose.
So the essential thing about anxiety is you want to help children not let the anxiety stop them doing the important things in their life,
Okay. Can I ask you a very basic and simple question, John, with regards to a toolkit, we'd say, a toolkit that parents could go to? I know personally I kind of think of comic strip stories and social skills stories, Carol Gray's social skills stories. Is there anything else that people can have in that toolkit?
They're fantastic because they're visual, and that's often a strength for children with autism, if they can see the visual sequelae and what happens one after another, and that helps them then anticipate and manage a situation by knowing, telling a story of maybe a child going to a social situation, experiencing anxiety, wondering what's going to happen next. But then you can have resolution whereby they employ some strategies by who they talk to, or back off and talk to somebody else or something like that, or learn to read signals, and then they can resolve it. So social stories are excellent strategy. There's also things like I like doing with children is like a body map. So you try to get children to, you do like a big picture of their body and little colour in cartoon, get them to identify where they experience feelings in their body. Like when they get distressed, where do they experience it? Is it stiffness in the neck? Do they find their heart beating faster? Do they feel sweaty and so forth? So that helps them be aware of their anxiety affecting them and grounds them in their body, because most people with anxiety are sort of out of touch with their bodies, and so once you're grounded in your body, then you can learn to relax yourself,
So it's almost like tying in those physical sensations with those emotional ones and kind of doubly reinforcing.
Yeah, because if you make the connection, the mind-body connection, rather than saying, my heart is beating, and you think, that means I'm going to have a heart attack, and you panic. You interpret, that's just a little bit of anxiety, and you listen and notice it, and then as you listen and notice it, it actually de-escalates it. You have to see it as the anxiety goes away. Like the big secret to managing anxiety is that actually it passes. So if you just experience it, feel the fear and do it anyway, feel the anxiety, and then it passes, and then you just do the thing still do the thing that you feel fearful about.
Okay. John, with regards to helping somebody that is dealing with anxiety, I know you said that it's when anxiety creeps into a point where it prevents somebody from doing something that they should ordinarily be able to do. Where can people go to, or who do they touch base with?
Well, I think because as a parent, you find yourself dealing with your child's anxiety, and you're part of that process. So that you might be trying to encourage a child to go somewhere, and then they experience a peak of anxiety, and you're having to deal with that. So I think it is important as a parent that you reflect about how you do. Like what tends to happen when a child gets anxious is the parent can get anxious in return, and you can get a vicious cycle of the child anxiety and the parent anxious, and then that it escalates. So the parent anxiety can make things worse. So the key thing as a parent is trying to respond in a calm way, trying to have an understanding approach to what's happening. Because if you remain calm when you're dealing with a child who's anxious, then you at least help that response doesn't make things worse, but also then can also help the child be calmer as well. So that's your first principle, if you like.
Okay. With regards to parents then and lessening their own anxieties, do you have any tips or pointers for those parents that do become a little bit overtly anxious when they're dealing with their child in the same state?
I use the same approach that I would working directly with the child. The first thing is get them to become aware of their anxiety, see it as a strength, that in a way it's out of a concern for their child and wanting their child to do well, and there's a whole lot of desire and love and ability to act in that. And then I try to get them to think in a very problem-solving way. What can they do step by step to help their child overcome their anxiety? What can they do to encourage them to do something? How can they do that? What rewards, consequences? How can they organise the situation? How can they do that? And then if they have a good plan of action where they can make progress, including by making it very, very small, the progress, and they're successful at that, then the anxiety abates. So it's good problem solving, good strategies. And then as well as with children, helping parents learn to relax, to tune into what they need to do to manage their own stress, so that they can come to this fresh and relaxed. And that is a very powerful model to the child.
Yeah, I suppose modelling that behaviour is always very positive for a child, particularly those with autism.
Yes, indeed, yeah, because what happens is if one person's distressed or anxious and the other person remains calm, that by de facto helps the other person become calmer and more, positive and more resourced to deal with the situation.
I know what you mean. John, with regards to anxiety, do you find that there are a lot of people have a comorbid depression, particularly as they get older, or do you find that there's very little linking both?
No, they're very much overlinked, yeah, anxiety and depression. Sometimes in the field of mental health, you can't tell one from the other to some extent. Somebody's depressed and anxious, so I think the larger group there'll be overlap. Yeah.
Okay, and with regards to kind of traditional methods of support and stuff, do you find that a very basic counselling would work, or do you find that it's more CBT based, or what would you feel would be most effective?
Seek whatever works for you. Counselling can help. CBT can help. CBT is a sort of quite a skills-based approach, to get people to challenge their anxious thoughts, to problem solve, and so forth. So that could be very practical and very helpful. But other things can help too. So it's not about ruling anything out. It's also about making the most of what you've got.
Yeah.
So whatever services are available to you, to make the most of them. And usually what's more important than the approach is the person. So if you get a good therapist, whatever way they're practicing, if they're good, kind...
and if you gel with them, I suppose.
You gel with them, yeah, exactly, yeah. But I suppose I try to focus on supporting parents, because often parents can do a lot more than they think.
Yeah.
With a bit of support. In a way, it's about being your own child's coach, stroke counsellor, stroke CBT therapist.
Yeah.
You can learn a bit about yourself and get the support yourself. Now, it does help, of course, to sometimes have another psychologist therapist to support. OT can also be a great support. They often have advise parents on lots of different mood management strategies or managing stress and different things that work for different children. So all those sorts of things. Avail of what you can, I would say,
I suppose you've got that interlinking then with the sensory processing stuff that can actually exacerbate anxiety, and OTs can be very, very beneficial in lessening sensory processing difficulties and therefore, I suppose, lessening anxiety.
Exactly, and lots of the things that cause children with autism to feel anxious are sensory things, sensory overload, sensory underload, particular situations that most people wouldn't find distressing. They might find distressing because there's too much light or too much noise. So building a map of that and understanding your child about the situations where they're feeling anxious is very, very helpful, and helping the child understand that too as they get older, so that they can have strategies to avoid these situations, to not expose themselves unnecessarily to distressing situations. There are different strategies of managing things about, how they manage too much noise or too much stimulation, and then how to manage that. So that type of very detailed information on your child's sensory preferences and challenges is very helpful.
Yeah, true. John, can I go in a different direction for a second and just ask you about self-esteem and a child? I know that you do a lot of work on that as well. With regards to a child with autism, I know that poor self-esteem can feature a lot for them. Is there any kind of strategies or any ideas that you have for parents to work on?
Exactly. The main thing is to try to understand the source of the poor self-esteem. And usually, in my experience, for young people with autism, is actually as they get older, they feel excluded from things that they can't participate in. They're not participating. It's hard to participate in their peer groups and some of the social interests and some of the activities which they may not be good at or be at the same level as other children. So I think in those situations you try to find places, activities and people where your child shines, where they find their niche, and that's the complete antidote to poor self-esteem. You want to give them opportunities where they discover their talents, their passions, and where they meet other and share that with other people, and then they feel much better about themselves. So that's often about breaking out, because if you go to a standard school, often it's very narrow, the range of interests and activities that are supported. It's maybe a few sports and things like that within a quite a competitive environment. So you try to find things that are supportive environments where they can explore their passions and interests and meet their friends and make friendships. And once they start doing that, then things are a lot better. And I think often some of the young people I've spoken to who have Asperger's and on the autistic spectrum, sometimes the friendships are particularly difficult, and particularly the most difficult friendships are the ones with peers who are exactly the same age. But often they find friendships that work much better for them with younger children or with older children or young people or young adults who they're bonded to by a shared interest, and those younger or older are more understanding and tolerant of how they're a little bit different. So you have to sort of think outside the box, I think.
Okay, I suppose looking at those special interest clubs like your Lego club or your chess club or whatever the case may be.
So they try to build on their special interests that they often have, but use them as opportunities for making a contribution, doing something very creative where they get lots of positive regard for that, where they meet friends, because if they find that, then they start feeling confident, feeling better about themselves. So that's really the source of positive self-esteem and self-worth, is discovering your talents and passions, making connections with people around that, and being able to make a contribution. And when you do that, then you feel good about yourself.
And I suppose, John, in our house, I know we function with very much celebrating the very little things. We don't need to have these big victories, like winning big matches or whatever. Sometimes it is being able to go over to the shop and order something, like pay for something yourself or whatever. I suppose it's our own perspectives too on those little victories, that will in turn influence our children.
Exactly. I think you said it. You're totally on the right track there, because if you're in a competitive environment, people only celebrate the big victories. But this is not a competitive. You want to just each child make their own progress and own success. So a small thing, doing something by themselves, going to the shop, making a friendship, taking up an interest, learning something, you celebrate them and put them in environments where they're celebrated and everybody enjoys that, and then they will feel better about themselves. So it's about protecting them from some of the harsher competitive environments that don't make them feel good about themselves.
I know what you mean. John, with regards to medication, do you have any ideas on medication? Are you for it? Are you against it? Are you very much...
No, I wouldn't be for or against it.
Okay.
It's just not, that's a decision. It's medics, doctors who recommend medication, so that would be something that parents should discuss with medics and doctors around that, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose sometimes you have the dual aspect, or the people do need both counselling and medication. Like again, in our house, we'd be very much around the looking at the person as a whole, like looking at their entire being, looking at physical exercise and all that kind of a crack, as well as medication.
Exactly. So there's trying to look at a holistic view about what may or may not help. And medication is one of the options that psychiatrists and doctors prescribe.
Okay. John, to go in another direction again, with regards to anxiety, in your experience, do you find that it has increased in the last number of years?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. I'm quite taken how there's sort of an increase in anxiety around there. Certainly, that's just anecdotally, in my own experience of seeing more people who are anxious, and particularly the interest when I do courses now in anxiety, they're sold out. So more than any other course, so people are much more worried about it and worried about their children on that. Yeah.
Tell me, with regards to children feeling anxiety, then, do you have any idea as to why, or is there any trend or anything? Do you feel that social media plays a part, or is there anything that you see?
There is evidence. There was a study there in the UK, this was in the general school population, that particularly amongst girls, that social media has a negative impact on their self-esteem and increases their social anxiety. So that would have been looking at a negative impact of social media to have, so that it's hard enough to fit in with your peer group when you're just meeting them in clubs, as in the old days, or at the shops. Now you have to fit in with them in the online world, and you can't turn it off. So it's on all the time, and there's this pressure to be liked on social media, to put up all the right pictures of yourself, and that can have a very destructive impact, because there's no respite from it as much as anything else. Whereas, like, when people are more exposed to their friends, neighbours and family, they're much more accepting of them anyway. So I think social media certainly has a bit to play in that.
So in your opinion, I know my personal opinion is that social media is something that we need to keep out of bedrooms, that we need to limit, that we need to keep. In your opinion, is there... I
agree with that social media is something to be limited. In my experience as well, working with young people with autism, sometimes social media and the internet becomes a very obsessive, addictive, destructive thing in their lives.
Yeah.
I've met young people who are barricaded in their room with their technology and they're not engaging in any way in the world, and that's locked them away even further, and then they become more anxious and more depressed within the social media world because they're not getting real human connections or real activity. So it's a big problem.
Yeah. Can I ask you, John?
Cases, not so it's definitely worth limiting it, not as a replacement to all the other real world engagements, getting out there, physical activities, clubs, meeting people, all the other talents, engaging with people. You can't, because of course the classic thing for a child who's Asperger's or autistic, it's hard to engage in social situations, so they avoid it and go to the easier situation of the internet, which is easier, but then they never learn social engagement and they never get the reward of that as well, and the social media and internet connections are poorer and also lead to a little bit more anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and I suppose it further isolates the child or the young person.
Them, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but having said that, there are some benefits of social media because people can make connections around the difficulties they have as well. There's incredible support and support groups around autism and groups for young people where they can feel understood. So it's not all bad. It's just how the limits on that, I think, are the key thing.
Yeah. John, can I ask you one final question?
Yeah.
With regards to anxiety, do you find that boys or girls tend to present more with it, or is it very evenly kind of ratioed?
It's very even.
Okay.
But they might worry about different things, perhaps,
Okay.
There's certainly a much more cultural thing for girls to worry about attractiveness and appearance than boys. That's because we bring them up like that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And boys also to worry about competition and performance.
Yeah.
Because we bring them up like that. But that's our fault.
I completely agree. We're great at damaging small children. Sometimes we're great at doing it, but I suppose we're all. It's great to see that these workshops and stuff are happening, and that people are interested enough to try and make that change and to try and make the difference, I suppose, with their smallies.
Exactly, and if you also say to your listeners, I have my website solutiontalk.ie, and I've maybe over 60 or 70 articles on anxiety there that people can download and look at, either based on my Irish Times articles. So I've covered most of the topics there around that people might be worried about, and of course people, if they have other questions, they can send them to me and I can write an article in the Irish Times around that. I'm very interested in engaging people around that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That I might have.
Send in questions around, particularly around autism. I'll be very interested in writing some articles around that.
You'll have a huge influx, John. You'll be sorry you've said that.
I'm never sorry to get good questions.
Listen, John, thank you very, very much for coming on the show today. Okay. And I will be at the latest additional date in January. I'll definitely make it my business to be at that.
Okay.
So I'll meet you then. Okay, thanks very, very much, John, for your time today.
I am.
Take care.
Bye-bye.